The landlord would rather leave it empty than rent it.
We've seen government entities go up to 20-year terms. There's so many things you can rejig to add value, where it's kind of tidying up the leases or going through a rent review to increase income and capital gain as well.
Are the banks still lending 100% for businesses, or is that shifting now?
Yep, no, that's still happening. We are in the best buying conditions at the moment.
Team, welcome back to this week's Blueprint podcast. We're incredibly excited about our guest this week, aren't we, Rory?
Oh, it's a ripper of a guess.
So we're always in conversation with our clients about the different types of property, because obviously we're bread and butter residential. But when you get to a certain level, the allure of other asset classes starts to kick in, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
So we've been prodded and poked to get someone on the podcast to talk about the commercial space. When it comes commercial, there's only one bloke.
There can be only one.
There's only one
and
guy.
There is only one.
And that is Colliers sales broker, Logan Roach. Honestly, I've known him for a very long time and the most experienced person I've met in the commercial space. Just really understanding the game, knowing, what's suitable for which type of clientele. This is the guy to talk to. So I'm extremely pleased to introduce our guest, Logan. Mate, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Oh, no, legend. So today we're going to have a bit of a chat about your journey. We really want to talk about the commercial real estate space as well and do a bit of a health check.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're really going to get into sort of the ins and outs of commercial real estate as an investment and how it actually stacks up to residential, which I've got a few thoughts on that. You've got a few thoughts, so we'll break it down. But yeah, before you get into that, tell us a bit about how you actually found yourself selling commercial real estate.
Yeah, sort of the traditional thing where I went to uni, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Probably like a lot of people, go to university and did Bachelor of Commerce. Knew I wanted to get in business, didn't know what that meant. And so did a Bachelor of Commerce degree and then did a bit of traveling after that. Went to America, did a ski season. That was heaps of fun. I was getting paid $10 US an hour. And I
Cash or?
Maybe some of it. And I thought I was getting overpaid for what I was doing. But it was an awesome experience, met a lot of people. And so I came back and got a role with the company essentially selling rubbish bins. So I was in the waste. So basically I worked for a manufacturer in the waste and rail industry. And my kind of facet was waste they're focused on, and the product I was heavily involved with were these solar-powered rubbish bins. And so...
Solar-powered?
Solar-powered.
I've never heard of this.
Yeah.
Why does a rubbish bin need to be powered?
Yeah, so I'll tell you. So essentially, I was knocking on doors of councils. So they're our essentially one and only client, but there's probably 30 or 40 councils throughout New Zealand. And they had these solar-powered rubbish bins that compacted waste. And so they were put in areas that had issues with overflowing bins. So, freedom camping areas, tourist hotspots and the like. So my role was basically just to hit the road and just meet with these kind of waste managers of council and kind of sell these bins. And they're pretty expensive, about 8, 9, 10 grand a pop. But the angle was that, essentially opposed to having 10 overflowing bins, these had 10 times the amount of capacity and then a traditional bin. So, rather than 10 bins, you have this one in this hotspot and the compact waste. So it's all off the grid. And then they'll connect to this platform where you could kind of see how full the bins were.
Time to come and empty it.
Yep. And so then the collection guys were collecting them less. Got into that role and awesome experience. I was basically just left to my own device at the age of kind of 21, 22, which is cool. And the first day on the job, the boss said, go sell. So I said, well, what does that mean? And goes, just meet people. And so I think the first day on the job, I got database, and it wasn't really big. It was really the waste manager and parks and rec manager from every council. There's probably 2 people in every council. So I basically called out every council to get their basically mobile and email address. And basically got the database and then basically just called them up and said, I'm in town, let's catch up. So that was awesome.
But you weren't in town, and then they're like, yeah.
Yeah.
Get down to the door.
Little sales trick there. Saying I'm in town.
Nice.
But yeah, and so that was great. And that was B2B sales, and loved meeting people. But I was in that role for about 3 years and decided that I don't know if you guys have dealt with council, but they're pretty painful to deal with at the best and worst of times. It's all, people typically that work for councils, they only last kind of 2-3 years, and you put all this work in, then they leave, and you'll be back to square zero. And a lot of it's tenders and grants. So, they can only really buy the product until they've got a grant from central government.
Yeah.
So I found it a bit tedious in that end. And so after that, I decided, I thought I was a pretty good salesman, and I wanted to stay in the industry. But I basically just applied for every different sales role under the sun. Didn't matter what it was. And I actually don't even remember applying for it, but I applied for a residential real estate job, and she called me up and said, let's catch up, and said, cool. But in the front end, I was like, there's no way this is me.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And then I met with her, and I was like, whoa, this is actually a bit of me. This is cool. I like the idea of kind of working for yourself, and it's industry where you've remunerated for the work you put in. It's uncapped essentially. But it was that whole kind of selling to mums and dads. I was still a bit younger at the time, and my background was B2B sales. So, and that's essentially what commercial real estate is. So rather than B2C, and probably residential is a lot more emotional. It's more about indoor-outdoor flow, which I have no idea about. I'm not an interior designer. So I thought, well, why not commercial? That's theoretical. It's based on square metre rates, yields, all that good stuff. And so then I met with a whole bunch of commercial agencies and decided, yep, it's definitely me, and was thankful enough to get a job. And 6 years later, I'm here.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah.
No, what a journey. Yeah. And I think obviously it's identifying things you're passionate about, like looking at that opportunity between resi and commercial, coming from a business background. You had a business degree at uni. So it makes sense to pursue a commercial because the clientele, the buyers and the vendors, more so people that you can understand and talk numbers with, where residential is a bit more emotional
100%.
and more of a marketing thing. Yeah. So, tell us about, your first entry into the market and how things changed, because you went in such an interesting time, right?
Yeah.
You joined just before COVID, the pandemic.
Yeah.
That's such an interesting marker for our property market, commercial and real estate, because COVID was a turning point, and you can tie it to a significant property peak and property dip.
Yeah.
So when we talk about pre-COVID prices, post-COVID prices, or just after COVID when they surged. So it must have been such an interesting journey for you those first couple of years, and then to now to a bit of a lull in the property market, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, essentially I experienced both extremes of the market within a period of 3 years, which is, I think, pretty...
You did a speed run.
I did a speed run, yeah. So, no, it was real interesting. I was probably a bit blind at the front end, and essentially went in, and it was great. I was just saying before, where went in, it was a month before COVID, and then I think I basically had my first week of meetings, and then we went into lockdown, and going, crap, what does this mean? And nobody really had any idea, because I hate that word, but it was unprecedented. Yeah. I can't even say it right. Unprecedented at the time. I wiped from my brain. I can't even say it. So basically went into it, and then was like, okay, well, what do I do now? Well, it was actually, I flipped on its head and going, this is actually perfect, because I get to sit at home and I get to get a database and essentially
just prospect
and just, and do a bit of prospecting. Basically, where I work, we're very kind of patch focused. And so you focus on a geographical area, and it's real beneficial for everybody, because you kind of become an expert in that market, the local buyers, local mandates. So my kind of bread and butter is the Eastern Fringe, so kind of starts at Pamuel, Mount Wellington, Ellerslie, Green Lane, kind of everything eastern central of the city. And so I essentially database that whole area just on an Excel spreadsheet, and basically the name and number of everybody. And it was good, because essentially once we came out of COVID, I had this whole database And, I wasn't concerned about because it's about 7 months, 6-7 months before you start making money. So, there weren't really deals happening.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel guilty sitting in the office actually not meeting people.
Yeah.
Had that database, and then the first week on the job, called up this guy and said, look, let's catch up for a coffee, give you a bit of a market update. And he said, love to catch up. I'm based in Christchurch. And so I did a Zoom meeting as that was normal back then. So then basically called him up, and first thing he said, hey, thanks for calling me. Essentially I have 3 properties I'm looking to divest. 2, so there's one in was West Auckland, one in St Heliers, and then one in Rotorua, of all places. And so he said, you'd be doing me a real good service if you sold these for me.
All of them.
And this was literally my first day after kind of COVID lockdown, hitting the phones and going, shit, this is easy. And so
you cracked it.
I cracked it. And so, and that was my first day of cold calling officially after COVID. So that was awesome. And so that's how I got my first stock to sell. And, that hit the market where, because nobody could really pick the market at the time, there was just, and a lot of people working from home, there was just a severe lack of stock in the market. And as you know, interest rates were ridiculously low. And so those properties all sold essentially on deadline date and auction date, which was
magic. All three.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah. Which is awesome. So,
and you thought, this is just my life now.
This is my life. Yeah, this is my life. Yeah, exactly. So at that period, to go back to your original question, that period kind of 2020 and that fed on to 21.
Yeah.
It was really just getting the stock. And as long as vendors weren't unrealistic in expectations, and even some that were very unrealistic sometimes to get the result, just because of that crazy market. And then kind of go back a year or two, 22 onwards, obviously interest rates rose, then that's when the market shifted really quickly. And so we went from a market where kind of investments and vacant property were both transacting really well. And then kind of 2022 onwards, I would say 22 to 23, the market shifted, whereby obviously investments, that was a real struggle to sell, because as interest rates rose, properties, vendors were still targeting that kind of sharper yield from that 2021 market. So say, you're getting a 5% yield. Well, banks are charging 6-7%. They're going, well, why would I buy this when the interest rate's higher than what I'm getting in terms of a yield return? And so the bulk of our transactions, and it's actually just shifted recently, that kind of 22 to essentially 24, most of our transactions were actually vacant properties to owner-occupiers, and the major driver for that was the ability to get finance. Because if you have a good business, you're an owner-occupier wanting to buy, let's say, a retail building or office building or industrial building, and you've got good business, good cash flow, they could actually lend up to 100% of that acquisition.
Oh, wow.
Like, there were investment transactions, but, for them to make sense in investors' eyes, yields needed to be kind of 7-8% plus, and there wasn't a lot of that transacting.
Yeah,
it's kind of
mate, all the ins and outs of the finance. You need to be a finance broker as well.
Yeah. Those 7-8% yields, was that like specific to the COVID that particular time, or is that historically being what commercial investors expect?
At this time, yields always a reflection of interest rates. So most investors, they look at property and go, if I'm getting lending at 5-6%, I really want a yield around that kind of mark. Because typically,
so I'm covering my costs.
Because obviously you put a bigger deposit down as well. Typically with commercial, it's 40%. But we did see transactions where you did get those 8-9% yields, but they were typically inferior B, C grade office buildings with lots of vacancy, and they were inferior, where you saw kind of in that 22, 23 period where most investors were just holding on. They weren't going to sell unless they got that kind of premium pricing.
Yeah. So if we go back, just make a bit of observation on that change and talk about market factors, because we always talk about residential. Interest rates, what we believe is one of the bigger drivers of cost of borrowing. But you also get this underlying market where, things change, people need to move on, but a big driver of first home buyers. So what we saw in that 2022, 23, 24 was a massive peak in first-time buyers sort of regaining because they're going to transact regardless.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, comparing to residential, obviously you're in resi yourself as a homeowner, but just observationally, which one do you think is more impacted by interest rate?
That's a great question. I think commercial buyers probably would be because it's less emotional.
Yeah.
So
It's
it needs
just numbers, right?
just numbers. It needs to make sense.
Yeah.
So the biggest challenge we have with commercial is people go, well, why would I buy that at a 5% yield, for example, when I'm getting a term deposit at that rate? You know, it's secure, I'm getting paid. You know, it's very low risk where there's a few more facets in commercial property. But then, you know, what people are forgetting is with commercial, there's so many things you can rejig to add value, where it's kind of tidying up the leases or going through a rent review to increase income and, you know, capital gain as well, which, you know, a lot of people looking at term deposits forget.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say commercial because it's less emotional and, you know, I feel like for commercial, the negotiation, it's very kind of black and white. So if you tell a purchaser, you know, there's a lot of high net worths and family trusts, they go, you know, what's the price indication? And if you tell them, you'll get a very quick gauge of if they're going to, you know, put an offer in or not.
Yeah.
Where probably residential, it's a lot more emotional. And so you get the husband, wife, or the partner that really wants it. And they go to the
School
auction.
loans are a factor. And
100%.
Yeah.
And so they go in and they might have a budget of 1.2 and they stretch themselves a lot more.
Yeah.
You know, they're not living, it's not, you're right, this family is really not involved. There is an element of family being involved with their investment, but it's just more of a numbers game.
100%.
Rather than emotional.
Are the banks still lending 100% for businesses, or is that shifting now?
Yeah, no, that's still happening. We're typically seeing that with only really the owner-occupier market.
Yeah.
And they have to have, it comes down to cash flow. So if they've got a good cash flow, they're willing to lend up to 100%. Typically with investments, so, you know, tenanted property, banks typically require 40% deposit plus for commercial. Yeah.
30% for an investment property, right?
Yes. Well, depending what you're going to buy.
And it's with some caveats, though, to 10%.
Yeah, you can do 10% on some investment if it's a new build. But there are some non-bank lenders who allow 10% residential at the moment. A bit easier to get finance on residential. I'm just going to remind our viewers. Yeah. Commercial sounds pretty sexy, but no, we'll get into that in a second. I love picking your brain about commercial real estate because it's just, there's so many layers to it in terms of like what you talked about, like yields, valuations, that sort of thing, financing.
Yeah.
You know, because we get a handful of commercial deals, but it's not our bread and butter. We're the homeowners. So you can talk to me a bit about what I find super interesting is valuations of commercial properties, right? Yeah. This is such a crazy topic. Yeah. And renting a commercial lease myself for Blueprint.
Yeah.
And talking to many different, you know, landlords or people like yourself, the way that properties are valued, you know, can change drastically based on the income, right?
100%.
So I had this really interesting situation where understanding a commercial building where there's heaps of vacancies and there's tenants who are keen, just not at the requested price, you know? So say they want 100 grand plus OPEX for the lease.
Yeah.
And the offer is at 80,000. And the landlord would rather leave it empty than rent it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Because if you rent it, then you're confirming a lower value for your
lock in your value. Yeah.
Isn't that absurd? Wouldn't you just take the...
It is, yeah.
Yeah, like, yeah. Tell me about that.
We see a few interesting things in our industry. And, and that's probably another thing of commercial property. There's a large chunk of these, you know, high net worth, and I don't know the building you're talking about, but family trusts who own a lot of property. Yeah. And they just basically have the ability to stomach that loss income. Yeah. Until they get their number. And the other thing they're probably factoring in for that one, and what we see often is they have this building and say, you know, that 80 grand, well, it's under market kind of a square metre rate. Yeah. And, you know, the other people in the building, they're paying 300 a square metre, where that person's own, you know, they're offering 260 or 270 a square metre, whatever it is.
Yes.
Well, they're probably thinking, well, if we give this person a deal at 260 a square metre, how's that are we going to have all the other tenants within that building knocking on the door and going, hey, they're paying this. Yeah. Why aren't we getting that? Yeah. And that actually, and what people forget is for rents, especially in the commercial leasing space, it's all based on comparable data. So, there's a lot of these commercial landlords that kind of have a monopoly on this kind of market or area.
Yeah.
And so they go, well, I'm controlling the square meter rate. So if I drop that, how is that going to, it's actually might, even though I'm getting the extra 80 grand, that might negatively impact the rest of my portfolio.
Oh, true.
Yeah. I don't know if that's the case, but that might be one kind of reason. But look, if it was my one asset and I've got this vacancy, I go 100%, we can do it at 80 grand.
Do a deal.
And maybe put a market rent review within kind of 2 years or agreed market rental increase to kind of fix it in. But, provide that discount on the front end to kind of incentivize people. But you'll see in the office leasing space, because there's a lot more vacancy than kind of other facets of the commercial world, whether it's retail or industrial, there's a lot more incentives being provided for tenants. Tenants actually have the power.
Yeah. Couple months free rent.
Couple months rent free, fit out contribution, that kind of thing to get kind of tenants on board.
Yeah.
Magic.
Crazy stuff, eh? I'm thinking from this sort of plebeian place for us who are all leveraged up to our eyeballs and we couldn't afford to not have a tenant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's some people out there who's it's not a problem. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Must be nice.
Yeah. It must be nice. Yeah.
We'll get there one day.
I mean, we've tried in this building, right, to get a little bit extra, and it was a no.
Yeah, was it hard? No.
It's just not happening.
Thanks for coming. Yeah. Oh, no, that's brilliant. Any more questions before we move on?
Yeah, do you see like many mum and dad investors coming through, like people that have like built up a resi portfolio and then they come saying, knocking on your door, they want to?
Great question.
That's a great question. Yeah, absolutely. And that's picked up a lot in the last 6 months, especially in my market. So working back, so my market is kind of sub 20 million, but bulk of my transactions are anywhere from kind of 2 to 5 million. That kind of sub $3 million space, very active, and there's a severe lack of stock in the market currently for that stock. So in terms of just, good property, good location, and good long leases, there's actually, if you go on TradeMe, there's actually very limited stock in that kind of bracket. So, and the buyers of that are typically mum and dad investors who, have a residential property portfolio, and they want to kind of diversify their portfolio across kind of asset classes. So, yeah, to answer the question, there's a lot of them coming through.
Yeah, magic. Where's the bulk of your stock sort of sit in terms of like price range?
Price range, typically anywhere from kind of 2 to 4. That's probably the main one. But we transact less frequently in commercial, so I guess probably a high performing residential agent. I would say probably 20 plus properties where kind of our dollar bracket's a bit higher. And, we typically transact anywhere from kind of 10 to 15 properties a year. There's some brokers that might do 2 to 3, but, are very successful because they're focused on that kind of 20 mil plus bracket. Because obviously we're incentivized as a percentage of a sales price.
Yeah. So, mate, I've got a bone to pick with you.
Oh, let's go.
If I can be honest.
And I might
need you to hold me back.
Oh, no.
Logan's been talking to some of my clients and maybe steering them in the wrong direction, in my opinion. Because I'm a residential guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? From the finance side, look, the commercial real estate numbers, they may look sexy.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes investors can get a bit too big for their boots, thinking that they're, they can stomach the commercial. So, I get a lot of clients we sit down with and they all bring up, once our clients have got 6 or 7 rental properties, once they get to that part, which is an amazing achievement, they're now thinking about they want to take the next step.
Yeah.
And the net yields of commercial real estate look really attractive, which is something we'll talk about in a second. But what I want to say is, mate, I think residential all the way is the best way to build your wealth, right? Especially in the leverage stage where you just got to maximize as much leverage as you can stomach.
Mm-hmm.
The interest rates are more affordable, the loan terms are more reasonable, and you can do a higher LVR in most cases. So I'm keen to hear your thoughts, mate, and sell it to us. Why do you think I have got so many clients who are now trying to get into the commercial space? Because I disagree. I disagree. I think, residential all the way. The yields are good.
Yeah, you got 7 properties, go to 10.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, you're on a roll.
Yes, you're paying the rates insurance, but we're bank friendly. We're a bit more bank friendly. What do you say?
I mean, I'm going to be diplomatic and say,
Oh,
I'd say, no. I mean, you look at most of the successful investors in the world, right? They got a diverse portfolio.
True.
So I think focusing on one asset class isn't the right way. You want to diverse, whether that's commercial property, residential, or shares. But to go back to your question, the major difference in why you'd pick commercial is essentially the obvious one would be yields a bit higher.
Yeah.
So with residential, your returns typically around 2 to 3%, and that's a gross yield.
Yeah.
Commercial, your yields are typically at the moment we're seeing anywhere from kind of 5 to 7%, depending on what it is. They're net yields, and so on top of the income that they pay, they also are responsible for your outgoings. So that's your rates,
OPEX.
OPEX. Yep. So your rates, insurance, and even you can work in your management fees into that as well. So that income you're getting is pure net income. With residential, you're responsible for that. So you get
all the extras,
100%.
Yeah.
And you're not getting calls from your your tenant 5 o'clock in the morning saying my toilet's broken. Sort it out. You kind of outsource that management, which the tenant pays for. In most cases, and you're not going there yourself, essentially.
Yeah.
Speaking of yields, I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on the broader market. I know you've got your patch and your focus area, but is there like pockets of New Zealand with abnormally large yields?
Great.
Large yields.
And for context, just to add to that, because Rory, we're talking all the time about cash flow. Residential real estate, and it's not a hot market for that in Auckland.
Yeah.
So lots of our clients, investors buying outside of Auckland, getting a gross yield of 8 to 10%.
100%.
Is it sort of similar?
It's very similar in that respect. So if you got people chasing yield, the highest yields you're probably achieving are in the regions, and that's probably very typical with, I'd imagine, residential as well.
100. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but I mean, look, we do see high yields in, cities, even Auckland, but there's a reason for it. Typically, it's because that, the building's got quite a bit of vacancy and needs a lot of capex and a lot of work to it.
Higher risk.
Yeah. And what a lot of investors forget is, okay, you can chase yield, but there's more risk, as you mentioned, and you're not going to probably get the capital gain like you would a property. Personally, I'd rather buy something at a lower yield in a really good location with, a tenant's going to be there for quite some time. It's going to be very hands-free, where a lot of those high-yielding properties, you're just going to have to be very active in terms of their management. I'm selling a building at the moment where there's an opportunity, but then some people are looking at it as opportunities, some people are looking at it as a pain. Essentially, there's multiple tenancies on this property. And so some people are saying, well, that's awesome, that's split risk. So if I lose one tenant, I'm getting all the other income from the other tenants. But then people look at that and go, well, that's a lot of management. I can't be bothered dealing with, 8, 9 different tenants. So there's a trade-off on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's probably like a bit of lease or tenancy risk. With the regions, right?
Yeah.
Which is another difference that we see in resi and commercial is lease terms.
Yeah. I was actually just going to bring that. Thank you, Rory, for remembering to bring that up, because you can lock in, what is the longest lease term you've seen in commercial?
Oh gosh, I mean we've seen government entities, go up to 20-year terms.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so for an investor, that's like a dream.
That's a dream. But
with rent reviews in there as well?
Yeah, but that purely comes down to they're spending so much money on the fit out and they're not in the business of owning property. They don't want to own the real estate. They just want to lease it. And they've spent hundreds and thousands of dollars into their fit out, specialist equipment and the likes.
Yeah.
And
so they're protecting their investment.
They're protecting, they're so well entrenched, they can't afford not to leave.
Yeah.
So we do see that. Yeah.
That's crazy. And because obviously, you might, if you're lucky for a fixed lease, these days everyone does periodic for rental properties. But for a fixed lease, you might be lucky for a 2-year lease. I had signed one up for 2 years and
exactly
pretty stoked.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
A 12-month would be pretty standard, eh?
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. I mean, I think minimum typically it's at least, 3-year initial terms with rights for renewal. Like you said, residential, it's periodic, or, I'm selling a residential development site at the moment, and there's a fixed lease for a year. And I assume that's probably as long as they go, really.
Yeah. And then again, to give you a concession, with tenancies in residential, the government, depending who's in charge, tend to, take favour with the tenants and provide more reasonable laws for them. Like
100%.
when Labor was in power,
very consumer friendly.
Yeah, making it super hard to, if someone wasn't paying rent, it's actually super hard to evict, if they're not paying rent on time.
100%.
Whereas I assume with commercial, they're pretty more, I haven't defaulted on my lease, but I imagine it'd be pretty.
It's a B2B transaction, right? So it's like any business dealing. So, I mean, if things got bad, I mean, it's, the government really doesn't step in. It's between really businesses.
Yeah.
So, and we have situations where, classic example is, rent reviews. One landlord thinks that their building, they should be paying $350 a square, and then the tenant, thinks it should be more like, $280 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then what typically happens is they both go out, get valuations, and then they meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Some rare occasion situations they go into arbitration, but that's not good for anybody.
Yeah.
Nobody wins in that situation.
Just for the folks at home, to touch on commercial lending and how it's different.
Yeah.
So we touched on those key things. These are standard, by the way. Obviously, each specific deal is dependent on who the borrower is, but as a blanket approach for commercial lending, it's 30 to 40% deposit.
Yeah.
It's an investment.
Yeah.
And then your interest rate is usually 1 to 2% higher than the resi rates.
Correct.
Something like that. And then the banks like to reduce the loan terms to ensure that you're amortizing the debt. So you can get a couple of years interest only maybe, but it'll be on a 15-year loan term, sort of maximum. And the loan term is dependent on the leases in place. So if you've got really long leases, you might be able to negotiate a longer loan term sort of thing. Residential, obviously, investors have access to interest only. You can keep rolling that over. Or you can do a 30-year loan term. So very much more flexible on the resi, but for a reason. Commercial is super sexy numbers, right? The net yield. But
and over a shorter time horizon.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm sort of leaning Logan's way here on the debate, mate.
Let's go.
Yeah. No. Only kidding. I'm part of the blue. I'll stop you right there, mate. You've got no idea.
Well, let's try and leaving the ledger out then, eh? What about cost of capital? What are our interest rates? You mentioned that it's higher in commercial.
Yeah.
So what are we talking here?
Yeah, so between 1 to 2% higher than resi. So right now you can probably get, it's going to be around 5.5 to 6%.
Yeah.
Right now you get a 1-year fix for 4.49%. Whoa. For your resi.
Yeah. I've heard there's a way around that, by the way. I've actually had some friends buy commercial property recently, and basically you can actually leverage off your residential property.
Shut the hell.
And
Don't
so,
no.
and so that's the way to get kind of residential lending rates opposed to commercial rates, which as you said is typically 1 to 2%.
Logan's totally right. So if you've got $1 million, investment property or your family home, you can fully leverage up to 80% and then use that cash for the resi investment and get home loan rates because that's the security in place.
Yeah.
So, no, you're right. So look, let's meet in the middle. Because I think the best way to build a portfolio or just a starter wealth, if you've got a family home, I think you should start with a steady rental investment. This is our prescription, doctor's prescription from Blueprint. Steady rental residential portfolio. And once you've built some equity, once you get to the next phase of your investment, we can consider commercial because, we might have actually some cash we can inject into the deal. After we've sold some properties off, or we might have so much equity now in our residential portfolio, we can leverage that and even get interest only for that or 30-year term, to make the numbers look a bit better. So I will 100% meet in the middle. I'm not gonna write off commercial. I think it's really important to diversify, like what I'm saying.
In saying that though, I don't think entry-level investors should discount commercial. There are options out for them. If I, had $1 million and I wanted to buy a commercial property, I'd probably buy an industrial unit. They're very simple buildings, a concrete block, slab, with an iron roof. So very little management, and you get a tenant in there, workshop, might be 80, 100 square metre unit. And then they will typically be body corporates, but as I mentioned, it's net yield. So the tenant's actually paying the body corporate fee.
No, that's
so there are entry level investments out there for people.
That's really good advice, and you can pick it up for not much cost, right? You can get these for $500K. Yeah.
If you went maybe in Hamilton, you probably find some options out there. In Auckland, you're probably $650 plus. I'd say. Yeah.
Okay, now I'll give you that, mate.
Yeah.
There you go. We'll meet in the middle.
And have you dealt with a few investors that their first entrance into property is commercial?
Yes, but it's very rare.
Usually the owner-occupied would be like that.
Yeah. I think it's more common for parties. I've had situations where somebody's in their kind of late to mid-20s and they've built up a bit of a deposit. And, they've decided that they're going to go traveling overseas and they don't want to buy their own occupied property and they kind of want a hands-free investment. So they've gone, well, why not commercial? It's a net yield. If I get a good tenant, good lease, I can just kind of sit back and forget. Where residential, the return is not as good and there's probably a lot more management involved.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of that stock out there. There's a reason why, because it's just easy. And
it's been snapped up.
And industrial, there's vacancy. I mean, it's crept up a bit. In 2021, vacancy was less than 1% for industrial market in Auckland. Now it's crept up to about 2.5%, nearing 3%. So it's still low though. Yeah. So if that tenant ever left, you'd have a flood of tenants wanting to get in there.
Of course.
Yeah.
Massive.
Can you give us a sort of state of the nation on commercial right now? Because, we've been through these massive swings the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Are things feeling stable? Like, what's the feel in the office? What's the feel when you talk to vendors, property owners? Is it feeling a bit more stable and there's a bit more confidence back? Or, what's the pulse check?
Do you want to get into office or do you want to do office, retail, industrial?
Give us a 30-second on each.
Okay, cool.
That's a good idea.
Cool. We'll start with industrial because that's everybody's favourite. Industrial market is, as I mentioned before, is still trading really well. Vacancy still at relatively low levels. And there's a lot of construction going on in that sector. So you would have seen, I don't know if you've driven down the Coromandel or wherever, Hamilton, you would have seen Jury South. So there's just not enough industrial land in Auckland. And so that's pushing out to Jury South. It's been rezoned and that's going absolutely gangbusters out there. Purely down to the fact that there's just not enough industrial land. And yields for really good investments, good leases, good tenant. We're still seeing some transactions in the high 4%. Early 5s, which is pretty phenomenal given commercial lending rates. And then kind of everything kind of works back from there. Where you've got retail. I would say typically yields are anywhere from 5.5% to kind of 6.5%, maybe a bit higher depending on what it is.
Sorry to interrupt you, because you're on a roll. But also a weird thing I've learned about retail is that sometimes the landlords, actually the performance of the business gets tied into the rent that they pay.
Yes,
This is crazy.
That's
you heard about this?
wild. Yeah.
Logan, touch on that.
I haven't sold a property with that situation, but I know where these, let's say there's a building in the CBD, a new development that precinct properties are done, or Robert Jones or whoever, and they've got this new rooftop space that they have, and basically they want to make sure there's a good operator in there. And they know it's gonna. If they put a good operator in there, basically they're gonna make a good chunk of change because it's gonna be the spot to go to. Everybody's vouching for that retail space, which isn't that common. It's only for those really high end premium spaces. These tenants will tender for the business. And sometimes in that tender, and they'll make a requirement too that basically saying that a percentage of your revenue gets paid to the landlord. So it does
crazy,
happen, but it's for those high end kind of premium locations,
just like the hot spots.
I mean, you wouldn't be doing in the main street of Howard going, this is the hottest spot in East Auckland. We take a percentage of your rent because tenants are basically going to tell you to basic stuff off. But
so if we're at the viaduct or something,
in the viaduct, like that,
we're just going to get so much natural traffic.
100%. I don't know. I don't think they do it, but think about Soul Bar. That's an establishment. And if they vacated, somebody coming in and going, this is a proven location.
We want to fight for this.
Then the landlord would have the power to negotiate that.
That's incredible. Sorry, Matt, I interrupted you. You were talking about retail.
5.5% to 6.5% yields in the retail space.
Yeah, typically. And I'm real pro retail, probably a bit biased because that's what I sell.
Yeah.
But you think about retail and you've got like suburban blocks, small suburban block, 5 shops, 6 shops that serve a large residential catchment, they're always going to have local people going to them, feeding them business. They're always going to really trade. And so good kind of suburban retail, and even if it is going back to the kind of mum dad investor, if it's sub kind of 3-2 million, you're going to have a lot of people going, I wouldn't mind owning my local cafe that's down the road that I can see it every day. I know it's a good business. They've been there for multiple years.
Yeah.
So that stuff goes really well.
True.
But then if you go to, say, some area where it struggled with vacancy, flow-on effects from COVID, like, for example, Newmarket, that's getting a lot better. But, there's areas of Newmarket that, if you're selling a building with a tenant in there, you'd be going, well, I expect a higher yield there, be closer to that 6.5%, because if I lose a tenant, I might have that loss of income for quite some time before I find a suitable tenant paying, fair market rent.
Mm.
And then office is typically the asset class that has the highest yields, purely down to just vacancy.
I feel like you left office for last for a reason, because
it's a great asset.
A thing called Zoom and Google Meets has just destroyed the money.
Yeah. But I tell you what, there's so much opportunity there as well.
Agreed.
There's a lot of high net worth, well-versed, add value investors that are buying these properties because they do have vacancy and going, I've got 10 in my back pocket that I can put into that vacancy, or it's under-rented. I know I can increase the income, and I can buy it today on a discount because the income's low.
Yeah.
But then if I get these tenants and rejig these leases and negotiate a market rent review, well, I've increased the rent by 30-40%.
Creating equity.
And it's like residential, right? Then you can, what these high net worth or, add value investors do is then they basically go get it revalued and go, well, my building's gone from, 5 million to 8 million, whatever it is. Well, you can use equity and rinse and repeat and do it again. So there's opportunities in that sector. But typically because a lot of people working from home, flow-on effects from COVID and people downsizing the office spaces, we see typically higher yields achieved in office.
Interesting.
Is there anything we haven't touched on that you feel like is crucial?
If you got a commercial property, give me a round.
Oh, you couldn't help yourself.
Yeah, I had to do
it. No, absolutely. I can speak for that.
I just think for your audience, just to not discount it, and there's just a lot of opportunity out there, and happy to have a chat, kind of talk through kind of the opportunities in that market, especially we're in the, I sound like an agent here, but we are in the best buying conditions at the moment. Yields have come down quite a bit. Vendors' expectations, they're not holding on to that 2021 kind of value. They understand the market, and businesses starting to trade a lot better. So
it's got to, right? Like, it's a scientific fact. I was talking about the other day, Rory, as interest rates are coming down, things have got to improve. It's just how the world works.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think, these interest rate drops are great. Obviously, at the 50 basis point drop at the moment, I think it's probably just more market sentiment. We're not seeing a direct correlation to property values yet, but they're flow-on effects, basic economics. In 6 months' time, there's definitely going to be a shift, and we're in that kind of busy summer period at the moment where we're getting a lot more inquiry on property because people want to buy something before the end of the year, settle on in the new year, and they're probably time the market well, and maybe when they settle, interest rates will be a bit lower as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
You talk about office space and stuff and what COVID did and the high vacancies, and you see them everywhere. But the opportunity that sits there, like as you've just explained, and then retail, similar with sort of COVID and online shopping, and you hear the scaremongering word is like, retail's dead. But that's your space, and you're seeing that there is opportunity there, and you alluded to the local shopping strip. So I just want to say, keep an open mind, it's
absolutely.
Like there's keeping.
We'll keep an open mind. You can. No. I'm really keen on commercial. I'm keen. After a few residential, I'm keen to jump in.
You almost bought a commercial property, didn't you, mate?
Yeah. I did. Yeah, but
What, you didn't call me?
Yeah, you were involved, mate. Logan, such a treat having you on, man. That wasn't lightly, so I really appreciate it.
Cool, thanks for
And
having me.
it's not going to be long till you're on for your next market update, so thanks again.